in one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Something strange was happening that night, because the place did not feel warm like it usually did. Instead, it felt cold and tense, as if a storm had entered through the big glass doors and filled the air with fear, even though the weather outside was calm and clear. And every guest sitting at the tables could feel it in their chest. Forks stopped in the middle of the air, a glass paused before touching someone's lips, and a soft, nervous shaking could be seen in the hands of a young waiter who's trying to carry a tray without making any noise. And the reason for this heavy silence was simple and terrifying at the same time. Madame Veronica, the powerful millionaire's wife, had just walked in, her high heels making a sharp sound on the marble floor, her long coat flowing behind her like a shadow, her eyes cold and sharp, as if she was looking for someone to attack. And the moment people saw her, they quickly looked away, pretending to read their menus or check their phones, because no one wanted to be noticed by her. She had a name in this city that everyone knew and feared. People called her the Ice Queen, not because she was beautiful like ice, but because her heart was said to be harder than stone. And many workers in hotels and restaurants had stories about her cruel words. Some workers had been fired not for mistakes, but simply because she did not like the way they walked, spoke, or even breathed near her. And that night she already looked angry before even sitting down. She pulled her chair out roughly and sat as if the chair itself had offended her. She glanced around and said that the lighting was bad and the music was hurting her ears. A waiter came running with water, but she did not even touch the glass. She looked at it and said the water looked dirty, even though it was clean. Then another waiter brought soup and tried to place it gently in front of her, but she tasted one spoon and pushed it away, saying it was too hot, too salty, and too cheap for a woman like her. The poor waiter froze, his face turning pale, his lips shaking as he tried to apologize, but she had already turned her head away from him like he was nothing but air. And the manager standing near the counter started to sweat, even though the air conditioner was strong. He whispered to another worker in fear, asking where the new girl was, the new waitress who had just started that same evening. He told them not to let her come outside, not to let her go near this terrible table, because he believed with his whole heart that if the new girl made even the smallest mistake, Madame Veronica would crush her with words, and maybe even get her fired on her very first day. And the other waiters nodded, their eyes wide with worry. But destiny had already chosen its own path for that night, because at that exact moment from the door near the kitchen, a young girl named Lily stepped out holding a simple silver tray in her hands. She was wearing a clean black and white uniform that was a little too big for her. Her hair was tied back neatly, and there was something different about her walk. She did not look nervous or afraid. Instead, she looked calm, focused, and strangely strong, like someone who had waited a long time for a moment without even knowing it. She looked across the room and her eyes landed on Veronica's table. She saw the angry woman sitting there. She saw the unfinished soup, the pushback chair, the nervous waiters standing nearby, and she understood very quickly who this woman was. She had heard the whispers in the kitchen. She had heard the fear in everyone's voices. But instead of turning away or hiding behind someone else, Lily took a slow, deep breath and began walking toward the most dangerous table in the entire restaurant. Her steps were steady, and every step made the entire room more silent than before. Eyes followed her in shock, mouths opened slightly. Someone whispered that the new girl did not know what she was doing. Another said she was brave or foolish. A third said she would surely be fired before the night was over. Even the manager raised his hand slightly as if to stop her. But it was too late because Lily had already reached the table. She stood there with a gentle but confident posture, and for the first time that night, Madame Veronica looked up and locked her eyes on someone without boredom. She looked Lily from head to toe with a slow and cruel smile. as if making fun of her in her own mind, and the whole room froze again, waiting for the storm that everyone knew was coming. But what they did not know was that this was not just a normal meeting between a rich customer and the poor waitress. This was the beginning of something bigger, something hidden, something linked to the past. And in that silent, heavy moment, when Lily stood in front of the Ice Queen with a confident face and a steady heart, one question filled the minds of everyone in the room without a single word being spoken. Why did this young waitress, on her very first day, walk straight toward the most feared woman in the city, when she had every chance to run away? Lily stood in front of Madame Veronica's table, holding the tray with calm hands, even though the air around her felt heavy and sharp like cold glass. And Veronica slowly lifted her eyes, looking at the young waitress with open disrespect, her lips curling into a small, cruel smile, as if she had already decided that this girl was nothing. And she tilted her head slightly and spoke in a loud, cutting voice so that the whole restaurant could hear, asking if the restaurant had run out of real workers and now had to send children to serve her food. A few people in the background let out nervous breaths. Some turned their faces away, waiting for Lily to break into tears or say sorry again and again. But Lily did not cry, and she did not step back. Instead, she looked straight at Veronica, and for a moment, her eyes were calm like still water. And then she spoke in a clear, soft, but confident voice, saying that she was not a child, and that she was there to do her job with respect, and that she believed every person in the world, rich or poor, deserved to be treated with respect. And her words were so simple but so strong that they filled the space between them like invisible thunder. And the strange thing was that Lily's voice did not shake even once, which made the silence in the restaurant even deeper. People around them froze, unable to believe what they were hearing, because no one had ever spoken such words to Veronica before. And Veronica's smile slowly faded, replaced by anger and shock, her eyebrows tightening as she stared at Lily as if she was looking at a strange creature she did not understand. And she leaned forward slightly, asking in a low and dangerous tone if the girl had any idea who she was talking to, reminding her that one phone call from her could end Lily's job forever, and that the city listened when she spoke, but Lily did not move. She only lowered the tray carefully onto the table and placed the plate in front of her with perfect control, then lifted her eyes again and said something that made the air feel heavy. She said that she knew exactly who Veronica was, that the whole city knew, but she also knew that money and power did not give anyone the right to hurt others, and that fear did not make someone important. It only made them lonely. And a quiet sound of shock moved through the guests like a slow wave, because her words were not loud or rude, they were honest. And honesty was something Veronica had not heard in a very long time. The manager behind the counter felt his legs growing weak. He truly thought the next second would bring screaming, insults, maybe even a slap. But Veronica did not move her hand. She only stared, as if Lily's words had touched a locked door inside her mind. But her pride refused to show any weakness. So instead, she let out a cold laugh and told Lily that she was brave for a waitress. Too brave for her own good, and that bravery in a place like this often ended with pain. And she ordered Lily to bring her a new dish, the most expensive one on the menu, and warned her that if it was not perfect in every way, the restaurant itself would pay for the mistake. Lily simply nodded once, calmly, and turned to walk away, her back straight, her steps quiet but powerful. And as she walked back toward the kitchen, every eye in the restaurant followed her like she was the only real person in the room. And whispers began to rise like wind before a storm. People asked who this girl was, where she came from, and why she was not afraid of the Ice Queen. And in the kitchen, as Lily washed her hands and prepared to take the next order, a small shadow of memory passed through her eyes. Something from a time long ago connected to this very place, something painful and unfinished, and while the chefs worked in nervous silence around her, Lily looked at her reflection in a metal tray and whispered under her breath that this night was not an accident, and that everything that happened next would change more than just one woman's pride. And in the main hall, Veronica watched the kitchen door closely, her fingers tightening slightly around her glass, because for the first time in many years, she felt something strange and uncomfortable inside her chest. Something that was not anger, not power, and not control, but a deep and confusing feeling that this young waitress was not just another worker she could break, and that whatever was coming next would not end the way she expected. Inside the busy kitchen, the sound of spoons, plates, and boiling water filled the air. But for Lily, the world felt strangely quiet, like she had stepped into another time. Her hands moving slowly as she prepared the expensive dish Madame Veronica had ordered. And while she worked, her mind began to travel back many years into the past, to a small, warm kitchen that once belonged to her father, a kind and hard-working man who had dreamed of opening his own restaurant one day, a simple place where families could laugh and eat together. And Lily had been just a little girl then, running around the tables, holding menus, pretending to serve food to invisible guests. Her father smiling and telling her that one day this would all be hers. But that dream did not last long, because one powerful woman, filled with pride and lies, had walked into his life and destroyed everything. And that woman was Veronica. Though Lily had not known her name at the time, she only remembered the cold eyes, the cruel words, and the rich friends who listened without question when she accused Lily's father of stealing and cheating, even though he was innocent. And in just a few days, customers stopped coming, suppliers refused to work with him, and the restaurant closed down, leaving her family in silence and shame. And her father, once strong and full of hope, slowly faded into a quiet man carrying a broken heart. And Lily never forgot the tears she saw in his eyes that night when he locked the restaurant doors for the last time. And even though he never spoke badly about the rich woman who had done it, Lily's heart had kept her name locked inside it like a burning secret. And now, years later, without planning it, without expecting it, destiny had placed Lily in front of the same woman again, in another restaurant, in another world, but the pain felt the same. And yet Lily did not feel hate in her heart at that moment. She felt something more powerful, a sudden understanding that she had been given a chance, not just to face her past, but to rise above it. And while the chefs around her whispered anxiously, afraid of what would happen if Veronica did not like the food, Lily focused with care, making the dish perfect, not for the rich woman, but for herself and for her father's memory. And when the plate was ready, decorated with careful beauty, she placed it on her tray and looked at it for a long second, as if finding courage inside the steam rising from the warm food. And then she turned and walked back into the main hall, where the silence slowly returned again like a familiar ghost. And across the room, Veronica's eyes locked onto the plate as Lily approached, watching every movement, searching for a mistake. And Lily slowly placed the dish in front of her, stepping back only slightly. And again that strange silence filled the restaurant, as if the whole world was waiting for Veronica's next move. And she picked up her fork, her expression cold but careful, and tasted a small bite. And something changed in her eyes for just 1 second. A flash of surprise she could not fully hide, because the dish was perfect, not just good, not just expensive, but filled with warmth and memory she could not explain. And for a moment her anger lost its strength, but her pride quickly built its walls again. And she asked Lily where she had learned to cook like this, her voice quieter now, not as sharp as before. And Lily answered in a gentle tone that she had learned from her father, the best cook she had ever known, and the words seemed to echo in Veronica's mind like a distant bell. because somewhere deep inside she felt she had heard them before. And the room waited, breathing slowly, as Veronica stared at the young waitress standing before her, trying to place her face, her voice, her presence. And a strange fear she had never known before touched her heart. The fear that perhaps the past was not as buried as she believed, and that this simple waitress carried a story that could uncover everything she had worked so hard to hide. And Lily, standing there with calm eyes and a quiet heart, knew that the real story had only just begun, because the woman who once destroyed her family was now sitting in front of her, unknowingly tasting the skill of the very man she had crushed. And in that heavy, silent moment, a new question filled the air like deep thunder. What would happen when Veronica finally discovered who Lily truly was? The next evening, the restaurant was more crowded than usual, because something about the previous night had already spread like quiet fire through the city, and rich guests, business people, and even a few curious strangers had come hoping to see the powerful millionaire's wife and the brave new waitress in the same room again. And the air inside the restaurant felt thick with excitement and fear, as if everyone was waiting for a show to begin. And when Veronica entered through the glass doors once more, wearing an expensive dress and a cold, proud look on her face, a deep silence once again filled the hall. But this time, it was mixed with curiosity instead of pure terror. And Lily was already there, standing near the counter, her hands folded calmly, her eyes steady, while the other workers watched her like they were watching the edge of a cliff. And Veronica walked toward her usual table and sat down without greeting anyone, looking around like a queen judging a broken kingdom. And her eyes soon found Lily again, a sharp and burning look forming on her face, because she had not forgotten the girl's words or the strange taste of the perfect dish. And in her mind, she had come back not for food, but for control. She wanted to shame the girl in front of everyone and remind the world who truly ruled. And so she called Lily over with a small wave of her hand, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. And when Lily arrived, Veronica deliberately knocked over a glass of water so it fell to the floor and spilled across the shiny tiles. And with a fake look of anger, she raised her voice and accused Lily of being careless, telling her to clean the floor like a servant in front of all the guests. And a few people gasped softly because they knew Lily had not caused the spill. And for a short moment the past seemed ready to repeat itself, rich power ready to crush a poor worker again. But something different happened, because Lily did not rush to clean the floor. She did not tremble. She did not beg. She simply looked at the water on the floor, then back at Veronica, and instead of showing fear, she showed calm courage, and she spoke in a clear, respectful voice that carried through the whole restaurant, saying that she would clean the floor, but not because she was being shamed, only because the floor should be safe for everyone. And she picked up a cloth and cleaned the water slowly and with dignity. And when she stood up again, she surprised everyone by reaching for the small microphone that the restaurant sometimes used for live music. And the musician froze in confusion as Lily gently took it. And while the manager looked ready to faint, Lily turned to face the room, her voice still soft but filled with strength. And she announced that she wanted to play a simple game, a game of honesty, and that the most powerful and respected guest in the room, Madame Veronica, would be the only player. And a wave of whispers passed through the crowd, while Veronica's face twisted in shock and anger, asking what kind of foolish game a waitress thought she could play with a woman like her. But Lily calmly explained that the game was simple. Only 3 questions, and that each answer should be true. And if Veronica was a woman of courage, she would not be afraid to answer in front of everyone. And for a moment, pride and pride alone stood up inside Veronica's heart, because she could not allow a poor girl to challenge her in public without responding. So she crossed her arms and agreed to the game, telling Lily to ask whatever she wanted, because she had nothing to hide. and the whole restaurant leaned in as if one single body. Drawn into the moment, and Lily asked the first question, asking whether true power was money or the way someone treated people. And Veronica answered quickly that money gave power in this world. And Lily nodded and asked the second question, asking if a powerful person should use that power to lift others up or to push them down. And Veronica hesitated for a split second before saying that weak people were not her problem. And a quiet feeling of discomfort moved through the guests. And finally, Lily asked the third and last question, the most dangerous one of all. She asked whether a person who had destroyed an innocent life for their own benefit could still call themselves strong. And this time the room froze in a deeper way, because the meaning behind the question was sharp and clear. And even though Lily did not say any names, the air between the two women felt like a gathered storm. And Veronica's face lost a little of its color as she stared at Lily, realizing that this was no game at all, but something carefully planned, something connected to the past, and for the first time, doubt and fear mixed inside her heart as she wondered who this young waitress really was, and how much she truly knew. The room stayed frozen after Lily's last question, and the silence felt heavy and uncomfortable, like a truth trying to rise from deep water. And all eyes slowly moved from Veronica's pale face to Lily's calm but serious expression, as if they were watching two different worlds standing face to face, and Veronica tried to laugh it off. Her voice cold and sharp again as she said that the girl's words meant nothing, and that she did not waste time thinking about weak people or old stories. But the slight shake in her hand betrayed her, and the guests noticed it, whispers running through the crowd like quiet thunder. And Lily did not speak for a moment. She simply stepped a little closer. Her eyes filled with a sad but powerful light, and she said that some stories never die. They only wait for the right moment to be heard. And then she slowly told the room about a small restaurant that once stood on a quiet street, owned by a kind and honest man who loved cooking and serving people. A man who was accused of lies he never told by a rich and powerful woman who wanted to destroy competition. And as Lily spoke, the story flowed out like painful memory turned into truth. The guests listened in shocked silence as they began to connect the hidden lines. And Veronica's breath grew tight as the past she had buried began to rise in front of strangers. Lily explained how that man lost everything in just a few days, how his family suffered in shame, how his little girl watched her father's spirit slowly break even though he stayed silent and kind. And then Lily finally lifted her eyes and said, in a clear voice heard by all, that she was that little girl, the daughter of the man whose life had been destroyed. And a wave of gasps filled the restaurant as people stared at Veronica in disbelief, realizing that the proud woman at the table had built her clean and perfect image on top of another person's ruins. And Veronica's lips parted slightly as her eyes locked onto Lily's face again, seeing the past within her features. The same shape of eyes, the same quiet strength. And for the first time there was no anger in her expression, only fear and shame mixing together. And she tried to protest, saying it was all lies, that the past was unclear, but her words fell weak and empty in the open air, because the truth held more power than her money ever could. And Lily placed a small framed photo on the table in front of everyone, showing her father standing in his little restaurant, smiling proudly. And in the corner of that same photo, a young Veronica could be seen, looking cold and distant. And at that moment there was no place left for lies to hide, and a deep silence filled the room again. Not the silence of fear this time, but the silence of understanding. And Lily looked around at the guests and said that she had not come for revenge. She had not come to destroy another life the way hers had been broken. She had only come to show that truth still lived even when buried under power and money. And that kindness was stronger than cruelty. And her words moved through the room like light breaking through long darkness. and many people lowered their heads in shame for ever fearing the wrong person, while Veronica sat frozen in her chair, the strong and untouchable queen finally exposed as a broken human being under her golden mask. And in that moment, one final question hung in the air like a quiet storm waiting to break. What would Veronica do now that the whole world had seen the truth of who she really was? By the time Lily walked back into the restaurant for the final time that night, the entire place felt different, as if the air itself had changed. People were no longer holding their breath in fear. Instead, quiet voices carried small waves of curiosity and respect. The same workers who once trembled at the sound of Madame Veronica's heels now stood a little straighter, their eyes following Lily as she moved. Veronica sat at her table, no longer the terrifying ice queen, but a woman who looked deeply thoughtful. Her face, once hard, had softened in a way no one had ever seen. She watched Lily approach, not with anger, but with something close to gratitude. Lily placed the final cup of tea on the table, her hands steady, her expression calm. She did not bow in fear or stand in pride. She simply did her job as she always had, with quiet dignity. Veronica stared at the steam rising from the cup and then looked at Lily. "Do you know," she said slowly, "why everyone in this city is afraid of me?" The restaurant went silent again, but this time the silence was not full of fear. It was filled with anticipation. Lily shook her head gently. "I think people are not afraid of you," she replied. "They are afraid of the pain they see inside you, and they don't understand it." Those words cut through the room in the softest way, like warm sunlight through a cold window. Veronica's lips trembled slightly. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. She had always been seen as a monster, a woman made of ice, a shadow that destroyed jobs and happiness. But now, this quiet young girl had seen something else. Veronica closed her eyes, just for a second, and when she opened them again, they were full of memories and unspoken stories. She spoke in a low voice that barely carried, yet everyone heard. "I was not always like this," she admitted. "Once, I walked into places with hope, and people smiled at me, not because of money, but because they cared." The staff exchanged looks, shocked at her honesty. She continued, "But power, betrayal, and lonely nights changed me. I thought fear would protect me. I thought being cruel would make me strong." She looked directly at Lily then. "But today, you showed me something I had forgotten. Kindness is not weakness. Calm is not fear. Respect is earned, not demanded." Lily listened quietly, not as a hero, not as a servant, but as a human listening to another human. Around them, time seemed to pause, that clinking of plates and the sound of music fading into the background. Veronica slowly pushed back her chair and stood. Normally, this would make the entire restaurant panic. Tonight, it only made them watch in silence. She reached into her bag and placed a folded card and a small key on the table. "This restaurant has survived because of brave people who never spoke," she said loudly enough for all to hear. "From tomorrow, the staff will receive fair pay, kind treatment, and a voice. If not, this key will unlock a new door for Lily, a restaurant of her own, funded by me." Gasps filled the room and then turned into quiet tears and smiles. Lily's hands shook for the first time, but she did not cry. She simply nodded in gratitude. "I don't need a restaurant," she said. "I just wanted everyone to be treated like they matter." Veronica smiled, a real smile, the kind no one believed she could make. She took one last look around the restaurant, not as a queen, not as a villain, but as a woman finally at peace. Then she turned and walked out the same door she had entered so many nights before, only this time no one feared her shadow. They remembered her lesson. And as Lily stood there, surrounded by new respect and warm gratitude, she realized she had not shocked the restaurant with anger or rebellion. She had shocked it with calm, with courage, and with simple truth. The staff gathered around her, their voices filled with relief and joy. And in that moment, the expensive restaurant no longer felt like a cold place of fear. It felt like a home, rebuilt not with money, but with understanding. The next morning arrived slower than usual. Sunlight slipped through the tall glass windows of the restaurant, touching the empty tables like a gentle promise. For the first time in a long while, the staff walked in without fear in their hearts. No one whispered. No one trembled. There was no tension hanging in the air. Only quiet hope. Lily stood near the entrance, tying her apron with careful hands. She was still the same young waitress, still in a simple uniform, with tired eyes and soft hands. Yet something about the way she stood now had changed. She was not important because of any title. She was important because of what she had done with kindness. One by one, the workers gathered around her. "You were so brave," said Maria, the older server who had worked there for 15 years. "I thought she would shout at you," another cook added. "I thought we lost our jobs," the manager said honestly. Lily only smiled. "I was not trying to be brave," she replied. "I just didn't want anyone to be hurt again." The manager looked around the room. For the first time, he felt ashamed, not because of Lady Veronica, but because he had allowed fear to control everything for so long. "Things will be different now," he said firmly. "I promise you. We are going to build a place full of respect, not fear." And that is exactly what they did. Days turned into weeks. The restaurant began to change, slowly but surely. The music became softer, the chairs more comfortable, the food more carefully prepared. Customers noticed the difference. The place that once felt cold and heavy now felt warm and alive. People spoke kindly to each other. Employees laughed in the kitchen again. Mistakes were forgiven. Help was given instead of blame. And Lily? She never acted like she was special. She continued serving, cleaning tables, helping the new servers, and lifting tired spirits with simple words like, "You're doing great," or "It's okay. Try again." Then, one afternoon, a black car stopped in front of the restaurant. The same car. Everyone froze for just a second. But this time, they didn't feel terror. They felt curiosity. Veronica stepped out, dressed not in expensive dark clothing, but in a simple, light-colored dress. Her hair was tied back. Her face looked softer, younger even. She looked around as if she was seeing the world for the first time. She walked in slowly. Lily saw her first thought instead of fear. She offered a calm smile. "Welcome back," she said. Those two words shocked everyone more than everything that had happened before. Veronica nodded. "I came for a reason," she said. She walked to the center of the restaurant, where all the staff could see her. "I spent years making people afraid because I was afraid of being hurt again," she began. "But fear is a poor leader. It destroys everything it touches. Yesterday, a young waitress reminded me of who I used to be." She turned toward Lily, not just kind, but brave in a quiet way. Veronica then reached into her bag and placed a document on the table. "This is a legal contract," she said. "From today onward, this restaurant belongs to the people who kept it alive through fear and pain. I will remain only as a silent partner. The staff will make the decisions together, and Lily will be the voice that guides them." Gasps filled the room. Lily immediately shook her head. "I don't want power," she whispered. "You don't want power," Veronica replied gently, "and that is why you deserve responsibility." Tears slipped down Maria's face. The cooks clapped softly. Even the customers, who had no idea what was happening, felt the weight of the moment. Veronica picked up her bag and moved toward the door. "My work here is done. I want to learn how to live again, not rule." Before leaving, she turned back one last time. "Thank you, Lily, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." Then she walked away, not as the woman everyone hated, but as a woman who had finally found peace. Lily stood in the center of the restaurant, surrounded by people who now looked at her not with fear, but with trust. She wasn't a queen. She wasn't a millionaire. That she wasn't famous. She was just a girl who chose kindness over silence. And sometimes that is more powerful than anything money can buy. Months passed, and the restaurant changed completely, not just in appearance, but in spirit, because fear had been replaced by respect, laughter, and quiet teamwork, and every staff member felt the difference in their hearts. Lily continued her work, but she also began teaching the new employees, showing them how to carry plates carefully, greet customers warmly, and treat each person with fairness. And every time she spoke, her calm voice inspired confidence, not fear. Veronica, true to her word, no longer interfered in the daily life of the restaurant, but she visited occasionally, not to dominate, but to observe quietly. And each visit became a chance for her to learn humility, kindness, and patience. One day, Lily received a small envelope with no name on it. Inside was a simple note that read, "You have changed more than the restaurant. You have changed me." She smiled and looked up at the busy hall, where servers moved quickly but happily. Customers laughed and chatted, and even the manager carried himself with pride and confidence instead of fear. Outside, the city continued as it always had, with rich and poor, powerful and humble people passing by. But inside this small restaurant, something rare had grown, a place where courage, honesty, and respect built something stronger than money or influence. And as Lily carried another tray to a table filled with smiling customers, she noticed a little girl standing near the door, watching with wide eyes. Lily knelt down and whispered softly, "One day, you'll see that being brave doesn't always mean shouting or fighting. Sometimes it means staying calm and standing for what is right." The girl nodded slowly, inspired, and ran to help clear a chair, giggling. And Lily realized in that moment that the story had truly begun again, not just for her, but for everyone who walked through the doors, and that the courage she had shown, the calm she had carried, and the truth she had spoken had created a ripple that would never end. Because one simple choice to act with kindness could change the world in ways no one expected. The restaurant no longer had an ice queen. It had no tyrants, no fear, no shadows of the past. It had hope, life, and a girl who showed that even the smallest voice, when honest and brave, could make giants fall and hearts open. And as the sun set outside, casting golden light through the windows, Lily looked around and smiled quietly, knowing that this was just the beginning of everything good that was yet to come.